I'm recording. Alrighty. I am ready to go when you are. Listeners, before we stop. Jeez. Sorry. I gotta readjust. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay. It's a really. Okay. Okay, I think I'm ready to go now. Listeners, before we start, I just want to let you all know that the Canuckinomicon is supported by folks like you. We are entirely listener funded, and we use that money to purchase research materials, new equipment, and most importantly, coffee and beer to fuel my hour-long rants about why fascism is bad. So if you want to support us, you can give us a one-time gift over at kofi.com/Canuckinomicon. That's ko-fi.com/Canuckinomicon. Or you can give us a monthly contribution at patreon.com/Canuckinomicon. If you don't have any spare cash and that's why you're listening to a free podcast instead of an actual journalist, then you can also do us a huge favor by telling your friends and leaving us a review over on iTunes or whatever podcatcher you use. Please be nice. The Canuckinomicon is an ancient tome buried deep within the heap of jockstraps owned by former CFL star Chad Owens as he faces assault charges in a Toronto court. Nestled within the ball sweat, you'll find the thick, leathery pages of this book, which contains knowledge buried within the snows of Canadian time. Today we open these pages to tell a tale of love, airplanes, and murder. Or, well, at least attempted murder. Spoiler alert, he screws it up. Alright. So, I'm your host, Benjamin Jr. Wandio. I'm here with my podfather, Todd Dirty Clyde Wandio. How you doing today? It is. It's still before my bedtime, but you know, we're getting there. it, and yet, in the same time zone. I am. Which is usually when we're recording. I've got nothing over here other than maybe some water. There's a cat on your table, I see. So we are reporting from the Crossing Clay mobile studio today. I'm at my house in Edmonton. You're at your house in Spruce Grove. We're connected over Discord. So if anything sounds like garbage, that's why. It should sound fine, though. What was that? All right. So, the topic we're covering today was actually covered by the far more popular and more well-known podcast, My Favorite Murder. I think it was a live show, but I'm not sure. But it is a Canadian story, and so I can't let those dirty American comedians keep the story to themselves. So I've decided to give it a bit of coverage ourselves today. So today we're talking about the story of Randy Mock. So do you know anything? M-O-C-K. Randy Mock. I guess, yeah. You might actually be familiar with this story since it happened in Edmonton in 1991. We'll see if it rings any bells for you when we get to the coverage. So, I don't know from experience, but I've been told that dating in your late 20s and early 30s is pretty hard. And I guess Randy Mock was aware of this fact. Things had been going pretty rough for him, you see. So he was 30 years old in 1991. or 1992, pardon me. 4 years earlier, he had actually tried to keep his girlfriend, who was 18 years old at the time, from having an abortion. So keep in mind, he was 26 and she was 18. He got a court injunction against her in order to keep it from happening, claiming that the two of them had agreed to have a family. The judge, on the other hand, disagreed and refused to extend the court injunction past 48 hours, immediately after which his girlfriend, who was 7 or 8 years younger than him, went ahead and got the abortion anyways. Now, well, they weren't married. They were just dating. Yeah, and keep in mind, he met her when she was 16 in 1986. He was the manager of a McDonald's, and she was an employee there when they met. So that's only the start of his kind of messed up little love life here. Later, in 1992, his girlfriend, who was then at the time 7 years younger than him at the age of 23, with him being 30, broke up with him in April. And he was absolutely heartbroken. Later that year, in June of 92, in April, she moved out of his house. They had been living together for several months. In June of 1992, he loses his job as an aircraft refueler at the Edmonton International Airport. At this point, it was all just too much for him, so Randy Mock decided there was nothing to do but take matters into his own hands. At 12:30 a.m. on the morning of September 23rd, Randy Mock called the home of Victor and Ann Cardinal. Their daughter, Donna Lawrence, who I should point out was married to another man while she was dating Randy Mock, and was now also pregnant. This is a different woman now. So now we're in 1992, or 4 years later. This is Randy's ex-girlfriend. Donna Lawrence was the daughter of Victor and Ann Cardinal, who lived in Edmonton, up in the Londonderry area. Randy Mock was told by Victor Cardinal in no uncertain terms that he was not welcome in the house. Randy had called and simply instructed Donna to look out the window in about an hour. So this is at 12:30 a.m. when he calls them. Because she was going to see something spectacular. We'll get to what that spectacular thing was in a bit here. I should point out that Randy Mock was known by his co-workers as a very nice man with great aeronautical skills. According to his acquaintances, he seemed to have a really good career ahead of him. He was not fired from his position as an aircraft refueler, but he was laid off. Apparently, the company that he worked for had just lost one of their major contracts. Which I've been there. As you know, I was an apprentice plumber for a while, and I actually got laid off of one of my jobs because they had several contracts with Alberta plumbing Alberta schools, and they pulled out of the contract with the plumbing company I worked for. And so they had to lay a bunch of the, new apprentices off and stuff, and so I ended up losing my job. That happens out here. And he was an aircraft refueler, so how that generally works is you have refueling companies will get contracts with certain airlines, like, say, Japan Airlines or Canada Air, or Air Canada, rather, and they'll refuel their planes and no one else's. And so when they lost one of their major contracts, they no longer had any planes to refuel, no more need for refuelers. So Randy Mock lost his job not because of anything he did wrong. He was already a pilot, and apparently a very skilled one. We know very few details of Mock and Donna's relationship leading up to their breakup. when he was 24, as I stated, he had dated a 16-year-old who worked with him at McDonald's that he was managing, which is the same woman whom he filed a court injunction against in 1988 to keep from having an abortion. He won the injunction, but she got the abortion after it expired only 48 hours later, and he then attempted to sue her for $10,000 in damages, but the suit fell through. So, this is a guy who dates much younger women, because in 92, when he's dating Donna Lawrence, she's 23 and he's 30. So, we get this kind of portrait of a man who is of a certain type of person. Like, he's looking for women that he can easily control, if that makes sense. So, they had been living together for several months before she left him in April. And now she was also pregnant. She had been married to Ray Lawrence, the man who was still technically her husband, since before she and Randy even started dating. I haven't been able to find out any details on whose baby she was having, whether or not she was planning on divorcing Ray, or if they were already in the midst of a divorce. The only thing I could find is that he was her estranged husband. Donna Lawrence's brother Randy Cardinal stated, Randy's the guy we're talking about. Her brother, I couldn't find his name, stated that Randy's actions were because she had decided to pull back on their relationship further. So I'm getting the sense that she's looking to distance herself from Randy for some reason or another. I can't imagine that he was an easy man to live with. Yeah, Randy Mock. Yeah, exactly. Mock had started flying lessons in the December of 1988, where he apparently excelled. He got a commercial pilot's license in September of 1989, and then a month later had permission to operate multi-engine aircraft, and apparently was taking courses to become a commercial airline pilot. Panu, Randy's friend, described him as a good-looking, charismatic individual. He was, quote, neat and clean, and could talk to the public. I've seen pictures of Randy Mock. He sported a mullet and a pervo stash that put your mullet to shame, and a pervo stash that belonged on 80s television. No, you have a skullet now. You absolutely could if you wanted to. Randy's boss Randy's boss said that he had several girlfriends. After all, he was a good-looking guy with a plane, and he did own a 1969 Cessna two-seater airplane. A little... I don't... Well, it wasn't like a big plane. It was just like a little... One of those bush planes, like a little Cessna two-seater. Yeah. Well, I don't know where he was getting the money, to be honest. Yeah, he was a manager at a McDonald's. Maybe just saved up. He was working as an aircraft refueler, so I can't imagine that's a low-paying job. I have no idea. Like, no, definitely not a skilled trade. Yeah, so that's the details we have on the background of our good friend Randy Mock. And we'll return with what Randy Mock's spectacular thing was right after this quick break. We'll just take a little moment here. And do you have your chanter? I need you to play the Hunterlunds Who's Who theme song. Yep. Was that thing in tune? Okay. I'll I'll begin our Hunterloon's Who's Who's moment here. Beavers are native to the wetlands, lakes, and rivers of Canada. Large rodents, beavers are known for their large front teeth, which continually grow unless the beaver chews to keep them a manageable size. In Canada, beavers are known as a national symbol, representative of the harsh northern work ethic and the implacable efforts of early Canadians against the difficulties of life in Canada. Beavers are known to congregate in large groups which gather logs, selling them on the open market. Over history, the softwood lumber market has seen its ups and downs, leading to beaver managers, in an effort to keep costs low, cutting the pay of beaver workers. However, this backfired in 1932 when a number of beaver intellectuals began disseminating pamphlets written by political scientist Gnarl Barks, teaching the beaver workers that the proletariat beaver should control the means of production. As a result, beavers began to gather in tight groups known as unions. Union beavers then rose up against the beaver bourgeoisie and seized the means of production, namely their teeth, and formed numerous beaver communes across Canada, which remain to this day. However, it turns out that communism often leads to poor management, which is why you often see large beaver dams in the middle of farmers' fields nowhere near water. This has been Hunterloon's Who's Who. Okay, perfect. So we're back after our short. Oh my goodness. My mouth is just not cooperating today. I or something, man. um so yeah, just to recap where we're at, Randy, probably a bit of a dirtbag so far. Um Not exactly a glowing portrait of a man who is respectful of his significant others and you know, I don't know, just we're getting a not great picture. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, well, in fairness there, he was working with a pro-life lawyer who I think was um really angling to push his case as far as she could in order to get the result that she wanted, which was basically an overturning of Canadian abortion laws, um, which had been made a charter right under Pierre Trudeau, right? So it's a very difficult thing to push in the first place, and I really think it was ultimately a publicity stunt to try and kind of push her pro-life agenda, and he just happened to be a good target for it. Because if you really look at the case, it's clear that this is an older man trying to manipulate a teenage girl into doing something that he wants. And I think he might have been trying the same thing with Donna Lawrence, but like I said, we don't actually know anything about their relationship beyond what I was able to find in newspaper articles from the time. Yeah, and she never was interviewed. Or if the newspapers did try to interview her, she neglected to comment. So mostly what we're getting from her side of the story is from her parents and from her brother. And the one interview I found with her estranged husband, Ray, I think his name was. Um, so we live in a post 9/11 time where you can imagine that Randy should not be able to just go into an airport when the air traffic control towers are closed and be able to take off. But this story takes place in 1992, where at the time, he was. The control tower was closed, and since there were no commercial aircraft leaving or taking off, this means that, at least in pre-9/11, 1992, a pilot with a license and a personal aircraft, which he had, doesn't actually need clearance to enter and take off with their aircraft. And since Randy was planning to fly locally, as we'll find out, he also didn't need to file a flight plan. He just went in, grabbed his Cessna, fueled it up, and took off. At the time, only people flying non-locally, such as to another airport in a different province, needed to file a flight plan. It had been a relatively quiet night in the Londonderry neighborhood. Then there was a distinct hum in the sky. Randy had come to town. Buzzing through the air in a 1969 Cessna two-seater, Randy was buzzing the neighborhood. He was an aerial acrobat. He had actually won awards at the Jasper Hinton Air Show back in '89 with 2 other pilots. So he was dipping and weaving. He actually flew so close to the ground several times that he cut the tops off of trees with his airplane. Police were running around frantically from door to door in a 2-block radius around the house, which was at 7244 149 A Street. We know the exact address, and you'll find out why pretty soon here. Evacuating people to London... yes, you're right. Yeah, because we're up in Londonderry. Yeah. So the police were evacuating people to the Londonderry Mall parking lot nearby. But Randy was in an airplane. And he would actually mock dive towards the people standing in the parking lots at the school and the Londonderry Mall there as they watched him. No. This is a 1992 in Edmonton. Is this ringing any bells yet? Apparently not. One woman actually described the harrowing event as being like a dream, only it was real. Randy was apparently trying to drain the tank of the aircraft or something. We don't know why. My guess is his ultimate intention was to not harm anyone other than his ex-girlfriend and himself, who, I should remind you, he told to stand at the front window of her house, because in an hour she was going to see something spectacular. I'll give you a hint, it turns out it was 2 hours. Yeah. So my guess is he was trying to keep from starting a large fire, as he wanted as little gas in the tank as possible. Or maybe it was just pride. Yeah. Maybe it was just pride. Maybe he just wanted one last glorious flight for onlookers before ending his own life. I'm going to tell you what he's about to do. At around 2:30 a.m., he crashes his aircraft into Donna Lawrence's house. Right through the front window. I'm guessing he didn't want to start a fire, and so he was trying to drain the gas tanks so that it wouldn't burn down like the entire neighborhood. Maybe he just was trying to... I'm wondering if maybe it was just fear. Maybe he didn't want to die and needed to build up the courage, and the easiest way to do that was to simply fly until he couldn't anymore. A 13-year-old who was watching the flight said he actually heard the plane's engine sputter as it zoomed towards the school parking lot he was standing in before it pulled up at the last moment, as if the engine was already starting to run out of gas. The police were tracking him with a spotlight, which he actually complained about to the police over the radio. I'll read an excerpt here. "I've been up here for a damn half hour. These idiots are still blinding me with a floodlight." He also said, "You know, nobody takes me seriously. The police department doesn't even take me seriously. If they're hoping I'll run out of gas over a highway, there's not a snowball's chance in hell." And the last thing that Randy Mock said before crashing was, "I want to talk to Donna Lawrence." So there was no doubt that this was about Donna for some reason. At this point, he either cut off radio communications or somehow lost his ability to connect via radio. A negotiator tried for another 40 minutes to raise Randy Mock to talk with him, but was ultimately unsuccessful. Just before Randy crashed, the negotiator said, "Randy, we're going to try and get Donna to talk to you, but we have to know if your radio's working. Randy, I want to hear your side. Maybe we can get some kind of a resolution and we'll all be happy. Randy, we're here to help you. We can't help you unless you're willing to help yourself, so I want you to talk to me." There was no response to any of these treaties from the negotiator. Or something happened, yeah. So, after buzzing the neighborhood for a solid 2 hours, his engine finally sputtered and died. A woman who was near the house, which he had managed to aim himself at before the engine died, described the experience. "The wheels were only 3 or 4 feet above us. Oh my God, was I ever scared. I thought he had a bomb with him and it was going to blow up right over us. When he went over our heads and hit the house, my son just shook his head and said, 'What a crazy guy.'" Which is, I believe, your response too. Oh my, yeah, that was exactly it. This kid's just sitting there and watches as this plane careens into this house. Another man describes Randy as he came in for the final crash, flicking a cigarette out his window. "I could see the red spark as he tossed it out. I thought, this guy must be Cool Hand Luke. Here he's going to kill himself and he flicks a cigarette out the window." So I just want you to picture this guy with this kind of like little, really well trimmed pervo stash, this kind of thick, early 90s Edmontonian mop of like mullet on his head, just careening in this little Cessna plane and just flicking a cigarette out the window right before he crashes into a guy's house. No. Yeah, or something. I don't know that his intention was to die. But I'm getting this picture, like, he seems very unstable, maybe codependent. Like, because he's described as having had a lot of girlfriends. Almost, like, the two that we know about for sure were much younger than him. And in positions of, like, below him. Like his first girlfriend's his employee. He's a manager at a McDonald's and she's his employee. Yeah. And not only that, when he meets her, she's underage. She's only 16. And then his second girlfriend's 7 years younger than him. And seems to be having a rough time with her other relationship. And so maybe Randy was providing this, I have no idea, but I'm getting the sense of a guy who really wants to be in control. But here he is. He's lost his job. He had a part-time job refueling for a flight club, but he apparently quit that job. He's a guy who's taking courses to become a commercial airline pilot, but isn't one yet. He's, used to win these air shows. I'm getting the sense of a guy who's very proud, very prideful, and is kind of at the end of his rope, if that makes sense. And then the way he's flying around, too, this is all about show. This is all about showing off, not just to Donna, but to everyone. He's talking about, nobody takes me seriously. I think if you were around now, he would have been hard into, like, the alt-right movement. Or, like, the MRA movement and stuff. Because that's the kind of guy he sounds like to me. It is. And I'm mostly frustrated by how little I know about what was going on in this guy's life surrounding this. Because I was going through, like, old editions of the Edmonton Journal trying to find every article written on this. And this is all the details I have, and even these few details, I'm already getting this mosaic of a not great guy, despite what his mother says in his obituary later on. And his friend just, but you know who else is clean and well-mannered? Jordan Peterson. Right? So, he crashes into the house. Donna Lawrence's father, Victor Cardinals, said in a kind of a... I've heard it said by other podcasters that Canadians always seem to have a bit. Victor Cardinal plays right into that. I told him he wasn't welcome in my home. I guess this is how he got in. Like, it's a very typical dry Canadian response to something like this. Yeah. Only one person... Only one person was injured in the crash, which was Randy Mock himself. The police's quick action in evacuating the neighborhood obviously paid off. And the aircraft didn't catch fire on impact, likely because the gas tank was dry. Emergency responders did have to evacuate Randy Mock out of the aircraft to the Royal Alexandra Hospital. He had suffered a cracked skull in the crash, and he was in the hospital for 29 days before finally passing away on Wednesday, October 21st, 1992. As a result, police were never actually able to interview Randy Mock. He was unconscious the entire time that he was recovering in the hospital. So that's, like, we know that the house is obviously damaged. I'm sure insurance probably covered it because, how do you respond to airplane attack? Yeah. So, and this is the thing. Again, I looked through. The only other coverage after the actual impact is that Randy Mock dies in October, and I looked through all the articles from September 24th when it was first covered to October when Randy Mock died, and there was no coverage in between or afterwards. There was like a couple little things like a couple days after the crash, but nothing huge. It was front page news only on the first day. Otherwise, it pretty much fell out of the public eye almost immediately afterwards, which is bizarre to me. A man flew in an airplane about what was going on. And it was clear that there was something going on here. Because here we go again, this guy who was national headlines in 88 when he was trying to keep his girlfriend from getting an abortion. And he was national headlines back then. Here he is, another spat with another girlfriend that results in him flying an aircraft into her house. So, what was going on? What was going on with this guy? And no interest at all. Just totally bizarre. Yeah, and there's this fear in Canadian news to sensationalize anything. But at the same time, I'm damn curious what this guy was up to. And the thing that frustrates me is that this was a guy who was a national figure too, right? Because of his court case earlier on. This seems like somebody that we should maybe pay attention to what his relationships are like, because then that can really put into context his earlier case with his earlier girlfriend. And there was no desire by anyone at the Edmonton Journal to do so. Or maybe there was, and they were just told it wasn't newsworthy. Yeah. Well, it was news, and then it was dropped, and then it was news again, and then it was dropped again, and it's become news again because it was found that Trudeau had indeed committed an ethics violation in his handling of the SNC-Lavalin case. It well, there's a lot that the Canadian media does wrong. I'm gonna be honest, and there's a lot that they do right, but there's a lot that they do wrong when it comes to coverage of political figures. And honestly, it's most often their lack of coverage of political figures. This SNC-Lavalin thing should actually probably be a bigger deal than it is. Uh, like, it should be a bigger deal than it is. And then we also have the question of, why did the Times break the brown-faced Trudeau scandal? Which I was just listening to Canada Land, which is a podcast and a news organization that is specifically media criticism. And they're talking about, how did we not find this picture, which was in a school yearbook, during the first election? And the Times, an American news magazine, is the one who breaks the story. So there's this weird thing about how Canada treats news. They really downplay everything that really should probably be getting more coverage than it is. Not saying that we should go full America and completely politicize and sensationalize everything, but I felt like when I was reading this, like, the articles are all really short. None of them went over more than a single page. I saw one that went 2 pages, that was on 2 pages, but most of them were just single little column, and no deep coverage, no really trying to unpack the motivation behind what he did. Just, this guy flew an airplane in, his girlfriend's brother says it was one of those love things. or something. Yeah, or whatever. It's a totally bizarre story. And I'm not surprised that My Favorite Murder covered it, because how do you not want to cover something like this if you're into true crime? Well, and I'm also surprised that there hasn't been a book, like a serious true crime book written about it, where somebody goes in and does some further investigation to try and figure out what was happening, how this guy was able to get an airplane up in the sky and fly it into somebody's house, and that's the part that I think is why this should have been covered more. Because this means that any guy who owns an airplane could have, at the time in 1992, flown an airplane into somebody's house. Right? So when we look at how little security there was to keep him from doing this, it's almost remarkable that some, say, like 90s eco-terrorist didn't go, load up an airplane with a ton of fuel and fly it into the oil sands. Or something like that. Yeah. It's amazing to me just how easily he was able to do this. And how little, how few barriers there were to actually get him to that point. All he had to be was a pilot and have his own aircraft, which if you're a pilot, you probably have at least an ultralight. Because you had to learn to fly on something. Yeah. Which is weird because you were living in Stony Plain at this time. Yeah. Well, it was in the Edmonton Journal, which is where I got all my coverage of. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And it's just so bizarre that guy flies airplane into house, got so little coverage. Cessna into a house. Yeah. Yeah, and that's right, because like you said, you grew up right near there. They've lived in that same house for decades. So, yeah. So that was just a little short story I wanted to bring you guys today, this week. We will be doing the fist fight between Morley Callahan and Ernest Hemingway. I'm just waiting for some research materials to come in before I can cover that properly. And that'll probably be a longer one because I'll probably want to do a bit of a bio on Morley Callahan. Because I'm pretty sure most people are aware who Ernest Hemingway is. But Morley Callahan might be a bit more obscure, especially for our American listeners. Yeah. Yeah, and like last time we covered Mordecai Richler, um, and he had a stint in Paris as well, living with a lot of those guys. Um, it was, I think, a little later, if I recall, because more. They might have. Yeah, we'll find out when I read That Summer in Paris. All right. So I think that's it for us, everyone, today. Thank you for coming in and listening. You can find me on Twitter at Canuckinomicon, where I'm usually posting weird gifs and talking about how I'm not an eco-terrorist yet. And wrestling. I talk a lot about wrestling. Wrestling and movies. Where can they find you, Todd? Yes, and an S Moose Man. They can also find you on SoundCloud, can they not? Or Crossing Clay. Pretty sure Todd wanted you. So you... So, that's right. You can find him over at the Canuckinomicon, I guess. All right, everyone. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Okay, bye-bye.